This is a 1989 Lamborghini Countach 25th Anniversary Edition. It is, bar none, the most iconic, ridiculous, insane, exotic sports car to come out of the 1980s. And today, I'm going to show you why. Because this car, with its ridiculous styling and its giant rear wing and its crazy red interior, it just wouldn't make sense anywhere else. Today, I'm going to show you around the Lamborghini Countach, and I'm going to show you all of its weird quirks and strange features. There are many. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and find out something I've always wanted to know. How does the Lamborghini Countach drive? And then finally, I'm going to give it a Doug score. But before I get started, a little Countach history lesson. The Countach came out in 1974, and it was sold all the way through 1990, which means you could buy this car in 3 decades. Not many exotic supercars can lay claim to that one. Now, the original design of this car was a very simple look, designed by Marcello Gandini of Bertoni. But the way that Lamborghini kept this thing fresh over all those years was they just kept changing it, constantly updating it with new wheels or with fender flares, with a giant rear wing. They added power. The Countach of later years barely looks anything like the Countach of earlier years. And this one was the craziest Countach of them all, the 25th Anniversary Edition, which came out in 1989. It had these giant hood strakes on the side. It had this huge body kit and this giant wing. It was absolutely ludicrous. Interestingly, this version was styled by Horacio Pagani. You may have heard of him. Anyway, while collectors fawn over the early Countach models for their simple look and clean design, I've always liked this one best because to me, it was the most ridiculous example of the most ridiculous car. The 25th Anniversary model was also the most powerful Countach. It had a 450 horsepower 5.2 liter V12 compared to just a 370 horsepower 3.9 liter V12 in the earliest models. I've also always loved it for all of its weirdness, which I'm going to show you right now. I'll start on the outside with one of the most interesting things about the Countach. That would be the side windows. Now, if you look at it, you have a lot of side windows. Window 1, 2, 3, and 4. The only problem is that this window, and this window, they don't open. And this window only opens halfway. I'm serious. Allow me to demonstrate. Yeah, that's right. That's as far down as that window will go because then it hits the door and it just can't go any further. Needless to say, there's no visiting a drive-thru in your Lamborghini Countach, unless, of course, you open the door. And so, since I know you're wondering, let's talk about opening the door. Yes, they're scissor doors, which means they're hinged down here and they open upwards, and opening them is pretty easy. You walk up to it, there's this silver thing protruding from the door, you push it, and then you just guide the door up the rest of the way. That's not that hard, although it does create mass hysteria every time you park this car and get out. The hard part is if you've locked the door and then you need to open it with a key. Now, Lamborghini placed the keyhole for this car underneath the little silver thing here. So in order to unlock or lock the doors, you walk up to your Countach looking all cool, and then you have to stick the key underneath the silver thing, which doesn't look very cool, and then you twist it and untwist it in order to lock or unlock, and then you can get inside. Another one of the Countach's most ridiculous characteristics is its dinky little horn. Take a listen. Now, a lot of Italian cars at this time had horns like this, but I think this one is the most disparate, the most aggressive, mean, angry styling, and the most pathetic little pipsqueak stupid horn. I can't believe it actually sounds like that. Next up, we got to talk about adjusting the mirrors. Now, interestingly, this car has power mirrors. You adjust them from a little control inside the driver's door, but that's just the mirror glass. If you want to adjust the mirrors themselves, well, have at it. They're on the car with this little rubber thing, and you can just kind of bend them every which way. It's hilarious. It looks like a cartoon in a $300,000 supercar. Another interesting feature in the front of the Countach, that would be the pop-up headlights, because of course this 1980s supercar has pop-up headlights. Now, if you look at the front of the Countach, you'll see a set of exposed lights. Well, those are the turn signals and the parking lights. Push the headlight button inside the car, and the true headlights, the pop-up headlights, pop right up, just as you'd expect them to if you want to have the most excessive 1980s experience. Now, back to the glass in this car. One of the most interesting styling details about the Countach to me is that every single piece of glass in this car is dead flat. Everybody else was using curved glass at the time, at least around the edges of the windshield, but Lamborghini, it's almost like they couldn't afford curved glass. So every piece of glass in this car completely flat. It's really unique even at this time period. And it contributes to the car's crazy wedge shape. Next up with the Countach, we gotta talk windshield wiper. Now, a quick glance at this windshield wiper, you already realize it's gigantic. It has two huge wiper arms. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see that it has two windshield wipers. But the problem with this giant windshield wiper is, of course, like everything else in this car, it was designed ridiculously. And so when it wipes the windshield, it stops directly in front of your face. Take a look at it from the inside. And now take a look at it from the outside. Yes, that's right. Everything to the left of your left eye isn't wiped, and to the right of your right eye is wiped. So when you're driving down the street, your field of vision is only half clear if you're driving this car in the rain. Now, one of the Countach's most unique design details are these two triangular ducts on either side of the car. I always assumed these were air intakes for the engine, but the duct on the passenger side is actually where you put in the fuel. Take a look at that. There's no fuel door in this car. Instead, you just walk right up, you unscrew the little fuel cap, and you stick the fuel into what I thought was the air intake. Who knew? Now, moving along to the back of the Countach, something I'm sure you already knew is that the Countach's engine is back here in the back under this hood. Obviously, everybody knows that. This is a mid-engine car. What you may not have known is the Countach's trunk is not up front. Instead, the trunk is back here, and it's actually surprisingly spacious. This car looks pretty crazy with both of these things open, doesn't it? Now, in Lamborghini wisdom, the engine cover cannot be closed when the trunk is open due to this giant rear wing they stuck on it. It could have been in the earlier models, but not in the ones with the big rear wing. So if you want to close the hood with the trunk open, first you gotta do this, and then you do this, and then you can open the trunk right back up. And by the way, if you want to open the engine cover or the trunk, it's easy to do. There are two little releases located in the door frame on the driver's side. Of course, they're unlabeled, so there's no way to know which one you're opening when you pull which release, but that's Lamborghini. So now that you know what's back there, you might be wondering, well, then what is in front? Well, it's a little storage compartment where you could put stuff. I mean, there's a spare tire in there and some other things like the horn and some fluids. But the interesting thing about this particular compartment is that it's completely open to the elements. You'll notice that there's a bunch of stuff that's wet in here from the car being driven before. There's no insulation in here. Now, the weird thing about that is this is where Lamborghini chose to put the battery. That's a smart decision. Put the battery in a compartment where water can easily get in. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the 1980s Lamborghini charm. Another interesting Lamborghini decision relates to the license plate lights. Now, when this car first came out, license plate lights weren't mandatory by the government, but eventually they became mandatory, and so Lamborghini had to adjust the car. And most automakers put them here on a shroud over the license plate, but the Countach didn't have such a thing, so instead they stuck holes in the bumper and they stuck the license plate lights in the bumper. Take a look around at any car you can find. I suspect you won't find very many with bumper-mounted license plate lights. Also around back, we have to discuss this car's crazy tires. If you're not into tires, this might not mean much to you, but this car has 345 width rear tires, which is as wide as any modern supercar's tires. Except they only fit 15-inch wheels. These are 345 15 tires. Needless to say, you cannot simply purchase tires for this car at your local Pep Boys. The final exterior quirk, you're looking at it, from that angle you can see it best. The back window in this car is minuscule, and rear visibility in general is absolutely terrible. It's ridiculous, and it's impossible to see behind you when you're backing up. That leads to a rather unorthodox reversing method, which a lot of Countach owners use, and which I will demonstrate for you now. You're supposed to push the clutch in, put the car in reverse as it is, then get up here, turn around. Now I can see everything. See ya! I'm serious, they recommend this! But of course, the quirks aren't only on the outside of this car, and once you're inside, you'll notice all sorts of crazy things. Starting with the first thing you notice when you climb inside, the right angles. This car does not have any curves in this interior. Nothing is designed stylishly. Everything is It's like Lamborghini built this car using only a ruler. It is absolutely crazy how 90 degrees everything is inside this car, and I didn't really realize that until I got in this one. My favorite bizarre feature in this car is the reverse lockout. Now this car has a dogleg transmission, meaning first is down and to the left, which is where second usually is, and up and to the left is reverse gear instead of first gear. Now you don't want to screw that up. You don't want to accidentally shift into reverse when you're trying to shift into first when you're driving this car down the street. So Lamborghini has thought of that. There is this little silver switch and it will lock you out of reverse gear, except there's only one problem. You have to manually put it there. So every time you get out of reverse, you back out of your driving in the morning, you're supposed to flip the switch back so you don't accidentally shift into reverse while you're driving down the street. It's the jankiest reverse lockout I've ever seen on any car in history. Mounted here in the middle of the cabin are the power window switches. Yes, this car has power windows. It also has power mirrors and power locks. But the power window switches are the strangest because they operate the wrong direction. You push them up and the window goes down. Interestingly, they show that on the window display themselves. If you push it up, it goes down. It does what it says, but why is it mounted that way? Moving on to the sun visor. This car has sun visors and they are actually pretty big. So big that if you're sitting in the driver's seat and you put the sun visor down, you can't see anything. Hidden here in the passenger sun visor is a mirror, and it's not mounted in the sun visor. Instead, you can pull it out and use it for whatever purposes you might need a mirror for in Miami in the 80s. Also, when you're inside the car, you can get a better look at this rear window. It is absolutely insane. Now, when the Countach first came out, it had more visibility back here, but as they added bodywork and crazy stuff on top of the hood, that rear window got more blocked and more blocked to the point where it is now, which is, it's more than half blocked. You really can't see anything behind you when you're driving this car. Another interesting detail of the car, let's talk about the seat controls. Yes, it has power seats, but where are the controls for them? Oh, that's right. They're hidden under this little cover. Interestingly, this cover not only contains the power seat controls, which naturally for a Lamborghini are divided into 3 different switches instead of just a simple one, but it also contains a little storage area. That's nice, especially because this car has no real glove box. In the glove box area, you will actually find the fuses for the car. Another interesting storage area inside this car is in the middle of the 2 rear seats. Lamborghini knew you were going to put stuff in your Countach. Don't worry, they got you covered. Next up, we have to talk about the climate control box. This was obviously added later as this car went through the years and it needed something a little bit better than what they had back in the 70s. The thing I like most about the climate control box is the font that says climate control. It looks like that 1980s radio font. They could have done anything else, but they really wanted this car to stick into its time period. The other cool thing about the climate control is you can instantly change between Celsius and Fahrenheit with the push of a button. In case you're driving this car up to Canada and back and you want to have the correct temperature display when you cross the border. Now, interestingly, and you'll notice we're in a new location due to rain, Lamborghini didn't do the same thing for the odometer and the speedometer. The speedometer in this car is in kilometers per hour, even though this is a US car delivered to a US customer and made for US regulations. It's in kilometers per hour with a little tiny miles per hour speedometer inside it. It's the same thing for the odometer. It's in kilometers. They did this through the Diablo, which made no sense. They couldn't just convert it for this country. Now, the problem with this comes when this car gets records on its Carfax report, like when it goes in for an emissions test or in the dealer for service. The kilometer reading on the odometer will get written down as miles sometimes and kilometers when someone actually knows what they're doing. And the result is that the mileage on the Carfax reports for these cars always jumps around, making it look like the odometer has been rolled back even when it hasn't. Next up, you can't talk about this car without talking about the driving position, and specifically the ridiculously thin pedal box. Take a look at this. The seat is a normal size, and then the floor mat right in front of the seat starts at a normal size, and then it all kind of comes to a point underneath the steering wheel and the gauge cluster. So when you sit in the car, you have to kind of angle your feet to the right in order to get them in there. It's really narrow, and it makes it kind of hard to drive this thing. Now, the other interesting thing you'll find with this car, that would be the owner's manual. This is a simple car, and it's not designed to have all sorts of ridiculous complexities or to keep you reading this thing for hours when you could be driving. This owner's manual is only 98 pages long, and that is in 3 different languages. It's 98 pages. The most interesting thing I found in this owner's manual relates to the break-in period. According to Lamborghini, you're supposed to keep this car under 6,000 RPM until you hit 4,400 miles. Now, these cars aren't driven all that much, 1,000 miles a year maybe, and so 4,400 miles in a car like this, you might have to keep it under 6,000 RPM for like 5 years after you buy this thing. That's crazy. Countach is bizarre and unusual and crazy and insane, and that's before I even drive the thing. So now I'm going to do something I've wanted to do since I had a poster of this car on my bedroom wall when I was a kid. I'm going to drive the Lamborghini Countach. All right, I'm in reverse now. Okay, is anybody going? Nobody's coming? We're good? Man, you just can't see a thing. I got to employ that reversing strategy. Heavy steering. All right, here we go. Now we're moving forward, which is nice. 50 kilometers, according to the speedometer, which is doing this. I can't believe this. This is so crazy. We're driving a Countach. My knees are sort of around the steering wheel. So the thing you can't help but notice is that the pedal box is shifted to the right, which is just terrible design and hilarious. I just can't see behind me. I literally can't see anything. The sound is great inside, but I just filmed the shots of it going by outside. It's even better out there. How do you make a lane change in a car where you can't see behind you? Well, you go faster than everybody else. The steering is tremendously heavy because it's not power assisted, and also you just got to work for it so much. The clutch isn't actually as heavy as I thought it would be. I think the clutch in the Testarossa and the 512 TR is actually heavier than this, which is surprising to me. Because I would have thought Lamborghini would have been like, just give them a heavy clutch and don't worry about it. It is heavy. Let's not pretend it isn't. It's not that heavy. I can fit my feet in the pedal box, but just barely. When I'm on the brake, my right foot does rub up against my clutch foot. I can't, the horn. I mean, Italians. The fact that it's hard to drive is almost part of the fun, I think. It's part of the charm of what this car is and what this car is about. You gotta really care. It's not one of those, I'll drive it to the store, whatever. This is a car you have to be in the mood to drive. Listen to that. I don't want to floor it too much because unfortunately it's wet today. I got bad luck. It's like those Top Gear laps with your favorite actor where he finally gets on and then it's too wet and he's not going to set a good time. The car isn't as low as I was expecting that it would be. I've definitely driven lower cars than this. I thought we would be basically sitting on the ground, but there's a Veloster and we're reasonably similar in height. Camrys don't feel like SUVs as they do in some cars like the Lotus Elise, which is a lot lower to the ground. Oh, even at speed, the steering is difficult to turn, which is interesting to me. Most cars with no power steering, they really lighten up as you get going. And this car is a little lighter when you're going 50, but I mean, just making a regular right turn at an intersection, it still feels as heavy as some cars do when you're trying to parallel park. It's quick, it's actually fast. There's no question about that. It's not just old car quick, it's quick. The other benefits of flooring in this car, you hear it and you feel it. The shift lever starts shaking. It's ready for you. It's like, yeah, let's do this. You feel the speed so much more than you do in virtually any other car. Surprisingly, at 6'4", I have reasonable headroom. I mean, my head is bumping up against it when I sit absolutely upright. But if I just sit, this is how I normally kind of sit in a car. If I just sit like this, I got a quarter of an inch or something. It's not a lot, but it's a lot of people said to me, oh, you'll never fit in a Countach. Well, I do fit. If you're looking for comfortability in a car like this, you should have bought a 911 or something else. The car feels reasonably stable, not like that F40 though. This car was clearly more of a, to put this charitably, a hand-built vehicle. It feels, the steering feels a lot heavier around the corner. The car doesn't quite feel, I mean, it bumps and shakes and rattles a lot more. This car is definitely not built for 200-mile-an-hour consistent Autobahn cruising. One of the incredible things about this car is the AC blows like tremendously cold. It like feels great. I can't explain it. It feels like I'm sitting in my Mercedes. Everybody is taking pictures. Everybody is noticing. Everybody is tremendously excited. I mean, heads turning. Even in South Florida, which is home to Lambos and Ferraris for days, even here, this car makes a scene. The thing about this car is, at no point when you're driving the Countach will you escape the Countach experience. Your either head is hitting the thing, or you're accelerating, it's loud, or it's raining and the wiper's blocking your face. There is no point where you're just like, oh, I forgot I was in a crazy, ridiculous car. You will always remember what you're driving when you're driving this car. And so that was it. That was the Lamborghini Countach experience. The history, the weird quirks and features, the crazy styling, the ridiculous driving experience. I'm so glad this took place in Miami also, which I consider to be the Countach's spiritual home. Anyway, I've always wondered just how crazy this car is, and today, after having spent the whole day with it, I can answer that question. Just as crazy as I always thought. Anyway, time to give it a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Countach may not be gorgeous, but it's striking, thrilling, exhilarating. Its design is an icon, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in a highly respectable 4.7 seconds, and it earns a 6 out of 10. Handling is good, but not exactly sharp. The steering wheel is difficult to turn, and the car is heavy. It's sporty, but it's certainly not on the level of today's most tossable or graceful cars, and it earns a 6 out of 10. Next up is cool factor, and I mean, come on people, this category was made for this car. It easily earns a 10 out of 10, and if this category went up to 11, the Countach would be the car to take it there. As for importance, however, it's not the most important Countach. The market has spoken, and collectors prefer the earlier ones regardless of what I think. Still, these things are approaching $300,000 in value, so it's hardly unimportant, and it earns an 8 out of 10. That brings the total weekend score to 39 out of 50, placing the Countach in some good company, but not quite as high as its more modern sibling, the Diablo 6.0. As for the daily categories, well, I suspect it won't fare quite so well. Starting with features, the Countach is weak. It has good climate control, power seats, but not much else, and it earns a 3 out of 10. Comfort, too, is pretty bad. It's not oppressive, but this isn't a car you get in if you want to be coddled or even if you want to slightly relax. It earns a 3 out of 10. Next up is quality, which measures reliability and materials, and both are pretty bad. These are notoriously maintenance heavy, and this is a company that can't even convert the odometer to miles. So who knows what else they skipped where we can't see it. It earns a 4 out of 10. Practicality is normally based on cargo volume, and the Countach has a shockingly big trunk, easily enough for it to earn a 3, but poor visibility and horrible entry and exit drops it down to a 2 out of 10. Finally, value. $300,000 may seem like a lot of money, but this car is an icon, and I've watched its prices rise my entire adult life. They'll keep rising, and that's enough to earn it a 7 out of 10, bringing the total daily score to a miserable 19 out of 50, not far above Yugo territory. Add it all up, and the Countach's Doug score is 58. It's not good enough at everything to score much higher than that, but it's really, really good at being cool.